Today I thought I would show a little quick breakdown of my drop in Hostage, my new track. You should definitely listen to it if you haven't already. I've made this project on FL Studio, but I actually exported the stems out once I ran out of stems and mixed it down in Ableton as well. But most of the sound design and all that's still here in FL Studio, and it's pretty much the same track. Anyway, have a listen. Yeah, so that's the drop. I thought I would instead of starting with the kick and bass, I thought I would just go straight to the main kind of element that I reckon makes the track unique, which is the sort of stuff we've got going on here. So we've got this, which is a kind of squelchy, juicy kind of sound I made, and the technique to kind of create this sort of sound is fairly simple, and you can get some really interesting results out of it. So let's see if I can find it. There we go. Alright, so this is the sound. Pretty cool, pretty cool. So what's going on here is, I'll show you what it sounds like without the effects. So it doesn't sound like much. In terms of the actual patch, so it's a serum patch, as you can see here. There are no effects in here, so you can get rid of those. What I'm actually doing is I'm automating the octaves of this little waveform here. And the trick with this technique is to keep the waveform simple. I've chosen this waveform, but you could choose a square wave or a saw wave or whatever. There's no particular reason why I chose the basic mini one as opposed to the basic shapes wavetable option here, because you got this one and it's basically the same thing, except it looks slightly different. It was just to ear. So the automation on here looks like, where are we? Here it is. So you can hear it's just an octave sweep if I play it up higher. Yeah, there's nothing really that crazy going on. You don't actually need this filter on either. It's literally just this. You could do this with any sort of sound. Just make sure it's really low in the octave so you kind of get that stutter effect. In this case, pitch doesn't actually matter because it's more about that sort of clicking effect that happens when a waveform's really low. Okay, so as for the effects, what really gives this bass its character is this guy, which is just a bunch of OTTs. There's no actual change. They're just literally just OTT on their default setting. So you turn this on, and already it sounds completely different. So in terms of how to get that sound, you've already kind of got it. From here, I just added effects to taste to sort of get a unique sound that sounds kind of large and, all the rest of it. So I use vocodecs on a lot of my basses. I love the use of the formant, or modulated pitch shift as it's called here. And you can get some cool results out of just the default settings on vocodecs and messing with this knob, this knob, this knob, and then maybe changing these guys. And sometimes the order here. I don't really mess around with this area much. I'm saying this really in a sort of basic way, but I think explaining which knobs I actually use is a better way than just explaining what they do. So towards here, it's less of a, you kind of hear more of each bandwidth that's going through the vocodecs. Okay, so that's that. We've got another OTT here. So what this guy is doing is I'm adding a couple of extra OTTs for no particular reason, just because I can. And then I'm adding stereo widths by splitting the sound into two separate sections. So here we have the stereo chain, which has all frequencies from this point upwards. Let's see if I can see this. So as you can hear, it sounds a bit larger. I'm just using the Haas effect in this case. So the Haas effect is where you delay the left or right channel by a slight amount, usually around the 10 to 20 millisecond region. Here is just the same thing as this one, except inverted. So all I would do in that case is just, you know, say preset as and do that, open it up and switch it. It's done. Okay, so that's just for general stereo widening plus OTT. I use Maximus Maximus is quite important for my basses as well, because multiband compression keeps the sound clean, I think, because you have, if you're using a lot of effects like OTT and all the rest of it, there's a lot of random jumps and spikes on the sound all of a sudden. You can use limiting to sort of compress it a bit if you want, but using multiband compression can help, especially when you have random spikes in the high frequencies, for example, the mid frequencies. So that's why I do this. I've also turned the bass into mono here so that there's no sort of interference in the sub. But this isn't really that much of a big deal to do. I just sort of, it doesn't really matter that much. Now we use Soothe here, but I don't actually use Soothe that often. I just kind of got this and gave it a go. You can hear it gets rid of some of the harsh frequencies there, but I don't think it's too necessary. Then we have this 100 Hz cut because I'm using the sub from the main sidetrans bass in this track, so I don't really need that main sub frequency. I just boosted the low mids here, some side chaining, reverb that's not being used, some extra limiting just to make sure it's not jumping up too much, and some more side chaining. The reason why I'm using Patcher for this is because I ran out of effects. It's not actually because there's any significant reason to use Patcher. I wanted to use an effect, I wanted to use an EQ at the end of the chain just to get rid of any of the side frequencies that might be interfering with the low mids in here, and just some general EQing just to clean up the bass. In some ways it kind of sounds better here, but I think in the context of the mix, I prefer to have it a bit more stereo. I find that the sound, if I want something to be as tight as possible, I would make sure it sounds really good in mono. And the more mono a sound is, the tighter it is, in my opinion. Especially with drums and stuff, you know, the transients of things, that sort of thing. And that sort of same technique has been used across all the other sounds here. As you can see, I was messing around with a few different ideas. And that's the great thing about using these techniques, is that you can just make a single effect chain and just route a whole bunch of different serum patches through it and see what you can come up with. So I could try a different wavetable. Damn, that's actually sick. Damn. Yeah, that's sick though. Wow. Yeah, you can get some really cool results out of it. I think I think I've got some new ideas for a new track. Alright, so okay, so the kick and bass. In this track, it's actually really simple, but I thought I should just explain a few little things that I did to it. So first off, the kick is from my sample pack, so you should download it. It's just, I think it's this one. And I've tuned it slightly to go to B. It sounds fatter just because it's louder here. Then I've got the bass, which is the drive bass from my sample pack as well, which is drive C, and I'm pretty sure I just pitch that down like this. Now if you listen closely, you'll hear that there's a slight bit of distortion over the top of it, and that might be a desired effect. I left it in there in this case, in the sample pack itself, but for this track I actually got rid of the distortion using Shaperbox. So how to do that is, I go to here, where are we? So I got the main drive bass, that's what it sounds like, and I used Shaperbox just to add a little low pass filter over the top of it that sweeps down like this, and then just sounds so much cleaner. I think this is a technique that Gulax uses a bit, or maybe he just said he did, I can't remember. It's really good, it's a really good way to actually mess with your bass after making it already, so you can really post-process your bass in all sorts of ways just using this filter envelope. So I highly recommend using that. So I just resampled that and then added that into the track. This is the bass here. The one that's in green is just the same bass except slightly softer in volume. I find that instead of actually using too much sidechain, it's sometimes helpful just to use the volume knob on the bass, because using sidechain can work, but also it can sometimes make it sound a bit too pumpy, especially when you're trying to get a really solid bass line, if that makes sense. Generally I have my bass at around -3 dB. In this case it's slightly louder, -2 or something. That could have changed in the mix down later on, but yeah, that's basically it there. And finally the snare is just a snare from a sample pack. I forgot which sample pack, but actually there's a snare that I've used in my track system, and so I just resampled that the stem from that track and then used it here. To make your snares work, I find that you generally use the punch of the kick to make the snare work. Like, I don't think you need to get a snare that's really transienty and messes with the kick's frequencies, especially when you're trying to get a really loud mix. Where are we? Here we are. So you can see without the snare, there's nothing happening to the kick, obviously. The kick is not changing at all, which is what I almost always aspire for. That's achieved through the use of sidechaining on the bass, as well as making sure that the bass isn't doing weird things like being high passed at the end of a certain effect or whatever, that sort of thing. Just some phasing sort of work. So I do really try to make sure this transient right here is almost untouched by other sounds. The snare does make it slightly louder, but for the most part it's not really interfering that much. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me talk. I hope this was helpful. I don't know if I'll make more tutorials, I just kind of do it when I can. But thanks for listening, I hope this was helpful. Subscribe to my channel if you want. Stream the track, it's out now on Spotify. And yeah, follow me on Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram as well, so yeah. All that good stuff. Okay, goodbye. Thank you for listening.